that is our experience. If you want to teach online, then face-to-face. Face-to-face, you know, you can pursue other things. But taking online class is requires more effort than taking face-to-face class. It's much more difficult compared to a face-to-face class. Thank you. This is all from our experience and some guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
Yeah, please.
I have been really thinking about Vandana and Sharat's point about this handling of equipment is not possible and it's necessary for creativity. I was thinking that, you know, doctors do things like virtual reality. Like if you can have virtual reality machines, you know, to tighten screws and fix things, then you learn by mistakes, by doing, I mean, they have after all endoscopy and stuff which they do, right? And that's the body. So if you go wrong in the body, that's bad. But I mean, with virtual reality, if you can improve that.
So the doctors do virtual reality at an advanced stage after they have had the basic training.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying that that could be one way.
You see, one student at least has to do one minimum set of experiments in the lab. Then they can be taken into that level.
So I mean, that would be a happy medium to be, you know.
A lot of private players are coming up with now VR, AR compatible classrooms, but only VR, AR will have a disaster, right? It should not have it. There should be some way to bring students to do one set of experiment, then they will get a feel, then you can do it.
Just to add on exactly the same point, because in our experience too, you know, if there is an op-amp based experiment, if the student does one of it on the breadboard, but when you have a cascade and you have to put multiple voltmeters, ammeters, and also many colleges don't have the resources for so many. The constraint of not having enough hardware is also removed when you use simulation. But the initial part has to be hands-on.
Yeah, one more just to add to is all these ICs nowadays, whatever you are using, like popcorns, they just go on if they do a small mistake, they get just and we are not able to get them replaced immediately. We need some time, place, order. So we'll be losing some time.
I just want to add to Madhurima's point. See, complicated circuit is a second step, even what you talk about complex. Let us just talk about the basic first thing. So if we talk about, because as I was just also remarking, that as it is in India, getting people in experimental science is difficult. But if you look at students, ask how many students know what is our line voltage. 220 volt AC. Where does the 220 come from if you look at it? Why do at your home plug points, some plug points have 3 wires, some have 2 wires? Okay, these do not require any expensive equipment. But the moment we make a mental change of doing things on the computer, it may be exciting for that time. It does not go a basic idea. I saw one of the slides, for example, when you are doing writing numbers. It's like when you compute on the calculator, you get 8 digits. Does that make sense when you measure something? This, unless you measure with a hand, you will not get a feel. So that's exactly what I think is the summary is that you can do advanced training with the simulation when you do not have the but that's not a substitute for the basic.
I think he has been trying to respond for a long time.
So this is a very familiar debate. I've seen this debate many times, I've given this talk many times, and this is the first thing. So let me point out, at the risk of sounding a little blunt, that a lot of you are overreacting. Okay? We should talk to the people who actually have taken these experiments and people who have never seen a lab, never seen a teacher, never had lab assistant. Why don't we find out from them? Okay? See, it's like this, right? We're all reading books. Now imagine you have diagrams in the book. Now imagine suddenly those diagrams are animated. What will happen to the book? Like we'll still be reading the book, right? Now imagine that from that animation, just like what we were talking about, you can actually go to the field and measure something on an instrument. Your mobile phone. I mean, 50% of the usage in the virtual labs is on mobile phone. The student, as someone said, you just can't do it. So I think there are many facets to this debate. Right? So just to sit and say, oh no, this will not work, it will ruin our students' lives because they never experimented. Like, I think that's overstated.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that science is based on an empiricism. New knowledge has to come from trying things out in the real dirty world, not in linearized, simplistic experiments. That's all.
Certainly.
totally agree. I don't think it discounts the point.
And we actually are inculcating the spirit of investigation, which is against the method of science. Because all these simulations are theory based. Whereas in the method of science, often you discover without a theory bias.
I think
Again, let's move on.
Yeah. See, it's also, no, there is something deeper. And since he said that, I have done it, I've also actually been in a number of technology enthusiasts, so I'm just repeating that your reaction is also very common. So it's not about, that what you have seen or what other have seen. It's also about learning. It's also about how it pans out in future and what you are looking at. The students who are undergoing these, what are the kind of things that you're thinking for them, what you're imagining for them. So what happens that if you look at the entire West, despite advent of technology and technology advancement, their classrooms remain the same. Their schools have laboratories which are very advanced. Their teaching is highly experiential, and therefore the thinking abilities that all of us are talking about is very different. So to say that those who are disadvantaged, they are getting, yes, technology does. You are right, when all your books get animated, it adds, and that should happen. I don't think that is a negative thing, but that cannot replace something else. That's the whole point.
That is the point.
I don't think anybody talked about replacement.
Yes, it's only a separate.
So,
For example, during pandemic time, it was excellent.
It reminds me of when this online teaching started, when we were a little younger. There was this ad, an idea, Jo Badal De Duniya, of Abhishek Bachchan. And when the world changed due to pandemic, I think this online thing was very useful. Now the question is that we have developed a lot of resources, whether they can be integrated into our old learning system effectively. I think that is the question, and I think these debates are all very well taken, because through these debates only we can go to a system where we can have a more effective way of integrating all the things that we know, both old and new. I think I take it in this way, and so I invite Madhurima now to change gear and to talk about regional diversity.
Hi, before they said the slides up, this talk was supposed to be given by Dr. Barilong because she would have been the right person to speak, being a person from the Northeast and being a faculty at University of Hyderabad, but due to some health conditions, she's unable to, so yeah, you have me discussing this idea. So I'm Madhurima from the Central University of Tamil Nadu. Yeah, this is the pleasure of being here. Indeed. Yeah, can I have full screen? Yeah. So the reason why I believe I can be a substitute for this talk is because I spent about 5.5 years working in Mizoram University, and for some reason this is a region that's very close to my heart. So I went beyond just using my opportunity to stay there as for teaching. I tried to integrate with the people there and learn something. So what I'll be sharing is mostly anecdotal, but I think there are a few takeaway points from this entire thing. So Northeast region. This is sadly a fact that most people do not understand what is Northeast region, and they are quite unaware of what it is. See, the Northeast region is divided by, from the rest of the land by, where is the pointer? Yeah. So this chicken neck, as it's called, is what actually separates the Northeast region from the rest of the land, hence called the mainland, and not in any derogatory term, because it is something which juts out separately. It's also important for us to remember that this is a completely different region where it's very difficult for people to understand the culture if you don't put an effort to do so. It's geographically extremely diverse. let's start please ask yourself, do you really know the capitals of the states of the Northeast? Let me even go one step down. Do you know what the states of the Northeast are? I have had even an HCU which had reservations for Northeast write my guest house accommodation request as Madhurima, Mizoram University, Nehu, Shillong. I'm like, which part of this makes any sense to anybody? Because these are some 3 different states that I have had a Naval Research Board project. The check came in name of Madhurima, Mizoram University, Kohima. Not even the same state. And this is from the Defense Organization. This is how literate we are about the Northeast. So, in addition to that, the fact is no 2 places are the same. Aizawl, which is the capital of Mizoram, is geographically young Lushai Hills where landslides and being cut off from the rest of the country is just 10 days of rains. Imphal is now in the news. I don't have to say, it's in the valley surrounded by the hills, and the civil conflict there has been troubling everybody. I'll be coming back to Manipur in a while. Agartala is fairly stable because it's actually a continuation of Bangladesh, and so the cultural influence is very strong, and it's a fairly stable place. It has very good connectivity. Kohima is on the hills. I was there in December, and there's barely any connectivity to Dimapur, which is the only place in the entire state which has a railway station and airport. By the by, Aizawl, the entire state of Mizoram does not have a railway station. So for those of us teaching physics, I had a shock. I could not teach relativity. Imagine one person sitting in a train and the other on the platform. They said, what is a train? And I'm not joking. Because they have never seen a train. Right. So things that we assume are very, very common are not. Itanagar is on the top of the hills. To the best of my knowledge, there's no airport or railway station there. I don't know if things have changed. Shillong, of course, has been a long favorite of the British. So people know it, and it's definitely Nehu is in a much better position than any other place. Guwahati has very good connectivity, and Gangtok has no air connectivity, but somehow everybody from West Bengal thinks that their tourist spot of destination is Gangtok, so there is some connectivity there. No 2 places are the same. The reality of these places are very different, and we need to really acknowledge the diversity of this. By the way, in a state like Nagaland, no 2 tribes speak a language that they can mutually understand. So they have evolved into something called Nagamese, which is a mix of other things. So it's very difficult for people to even talk to each other, right? Leave alone transport and other things. So one thing that struck me strong when I was in the Northeast is the happy celebration of teachers. They really celebrate teachers, from the bottom of their hearts. My students, the kind of love that you get from them is something that we have missed in the rest of the India for a very, very, very long time. This is possibly due to either the fact that education has come in very late to many of these places, and or religion. Religions such as the Vajrayana Buddhism of Sikkim or Christianity, where the teacher is given a place of reverence. So they kind of translate that to your classroom teachers, and the amount of reverence that is given is phenomenal. Like, you have to be there to experience it. So given this, why do people tend to move in or out of the states or the Northeast region for the sake of education? First of all, moving out is a matter of privilege. And intersectionality is something we keep forgetting when we have any conversation, because it's not as simple as why don't they apply and come. We are giving them fellowships. Hyderabad University has a reservation or had a reservation, or Delhi University has something. It doesn't stop there. The person who has access to that particular information, leave alone the access to come out, is going to be somebody whose parents are civil servants. The person working in the fields does not even have access to the information, leave alone the means to leave the state. So this is a serious problem that anybody whom you see outside is already coming from a place of privilege. This is true of gender. Anybody who's been in gender studies knows that the first generation of women who had access to education came from a certain class which was privileged. So this is bound to happen, but this is the reality there. Once they come out, racial discrimination is again very, very high. Either overtly or covertly, like starting from looks to comments about the food, to the clothing, to their attitude. And I'll be touching upon these again. But these actually are deterrents in moving out. And those who leave are either hesitant to come back, especially from insurgency-ridden states like Manipur, because once you're out, you don't want to go back there. It's really difficult to go. Or certain women, and this is something I have seen in Mizoram, the states where the inner line permit is still in play. The girls are not allowed to stay out after their UG, lest they find a partner who's a non-local. They don't want that option to be given because they don't want racial mixing. And the ILP is one way of controlling who comes in and who goes out. So these are very, very complicated sociological problems. But what this means is that girls lose out on their education. Boys are allowed to stay. Right. So these are things that we don't even think of on a normal day, or at least I didn't think of till I went there to be. On the other hand, outsiders are unwilling to come in, because especially like I had an offer from Manipur, and somebody told me that you have to give 10% of your salary every month to the insurgents. I said, why should I go there? I'm not going. Right. So people don't even want to move into some of these states, and hence those who stay back are those who cannot leave the state. So this becomes a vicious circle in itself. So students, when so much is difficult for them, why do the students want to step out? They have to step out because academic and other job opportunities are higher if their degrees are from the non-Northeast region universities. This is changing, but very slowly. Some of the universities from the Northeast are now picking up on the NIRF ranking, as much as I have my apprehensions about these rankings. At least one thing is it's showcasing some of the universities in better light, so that's good for the students out there. This is a comment that I got from one of the scholars, that apparently the interview board's reaction to them changes depending on where you are from. If you say your UG is from Guwahati University, it goes one way. Or if they're talking to them, the Northeast students, and they say, oh, my UG is from Delhi University, the tone suddenly becomes very academic, that, from being patronizing to recognizing that you have the ability to learn. We don't understand why this discrimination needs to be made, but somehow there is a very, very patronizing attitude of many interview panels as perceived by the students who are attending them. Right. So this is, again, it's a very, very tricky thing to be understanding. Less research scholars from outside are there or not just research scholars, but less scholars from outside are there within the Northeast region, which means there is a lack of diversity. And without diversity, you will not be able to comprehend other points of view. So the students also want to come out. I mean, these are the various reasons why they want to come out, because most of the senior professors are there in the mainland, they're not in the Northeast region. Because people don't want to move. Anybody who's senior doesn't want to go to the Northeast. Right, so these are all vicious circles in which the society is stuck. Global collaborations are better here, and education is a means to escape from harsh realities. They simply have to step out for survival. So students really want to step out, but once they step out, what happens? Like I said, those who come out are definitely for those from privilege. They have no social support whatsoever. You don't have a local Telugu Samiti or Telugu Sangatan or a Bengali Samiti or whatever. The entire Northeast is put into one basket, even in a place like HU. The reason I'm repeating HU is because I was there and I know the place. That's all, nothing else. it's not one homogeneous basket. But they lack that support system, which all of us crave for. At the end of the day, we crave for some social support. Freedom for girls. Oh, I have experienced freedom in the Northeast, which I've never seen anywhere else, at least in Mizoram. I could go anywhere alone, walk at 12 at night, alone on the streets. I was safe. Young girls are safe. And imagine if I were a girl who grew up in that society and came here. And at every point you are told your dress is wrong, you're out there, you should not be going out, or commented if you're out late, without understanding that this is a cultural norm for them. Right? How do you think that somebody who is not in a certain framework will know that is right? How does a girl who walks at middle of the night alone intuitively think that it is wrong to do so? But we expect that. We not only expect that, we are judgmental. Just see the impact it has on these girls. They would definitely, what would you do? You run back to your home state and say, I don't want my education, I'm going back. I want to feel comfortable. Again, these things drive people back. Again, this is constantly perceived that the southern states are far more tolerant and the safety of women is higher than the northern states. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Hierarchies are way too complicated for anybody from Northeast region to understand when they step into our mainland. The Northeast, at least the hill states, they don't have hierarchies. So in Mizoram University to date, the quarters are such that they're just allotted. So a professor's quarters is the same size as an LDC and they could be neighbors. Horror, I don't think we can ever do that here. Right, and if the person comes from that kind of a scenario, expecting them to follow certain unsaid hierarchies, and we have so many of them, as I'm very fond of saying, I think one art that we have all mastered is to put a greater than less than symbol in front of everything. Like we are so hierarchy ridden that ultimately it's like my mom's cooking is better than your cooking. Everything needs to have this comparison for what? I don't know, we are OCD'd about it. Right, and for a person who has no such notion, it becomes impossible for them to handle. This is equally true about age-related hierarchies where respect is given, but a kind of reverence that is expected. I am older, so I should get